Good morning. Welcome back. You're watching the broadcast. We are into the discussion segment. On my immediate right is let me not start here for purposes of gender balance. On my far right is Irene Otieno. She's the coordinator at the National Taxpayers Association. Irene, good morning.
Morning.
Your time is appreciated. And Dr. Justus Juma is the leader of the Justice and Freedom Party, JFP, in the country. Your time is appreciated here.
Good morning.
And we'll start off with the disputed revenue formula, which has failed in the Senate for the fourth time, and also look at the expected outcome of the president's address to the nation. But first, Elgeyo Marakwet County Governor Alex Tolgos has faulted the Commission on Revenue Allocation over the resource-sharing formula in the country. He said that the county receives little funds that affect the development and operations at the devolved units. This comes as the Senate has multiple times failed to adopt the third basis formula for sharing revenue among the counties across the 47 devolved units during a special sitting as financial operations in the counties take a hit. The formula was developed by the Commission on the Revenue Allocation, CRA, and forwarded to the Senate for consideration last year. The implication in the third formula is that the number of counties that have been receiving a higher allocation because of their huge landmass and high poverty indices will receive less money this financial year.
There are counties ambao wanaumia, Elgeyo Marakwet being one of them. Na sisi kama region pia tunaona kidogo ile the first and second generation formula ilitufinya kidogo. And you remember, Chairman, I'm the only governor who came to Senate. I went to CRA complaining about this formula. How I wish we started discussing this formula kutoka wakati tulianza na first generation tukakuja second generation, because we don't want this formula to break our nation. Tumetoka mbali, muongee na muhakikishe kwamba hiyo ni formula ambayo itakuwa win-win for all the counties and the nation at large.
If I may come to you, Irene, it's very important, very pertinent, significant, and crucial that the counties get money because it helps in the lubrication of the county economies. But why do you think, in your view, that the Senate appears to be deadlocked on this matter? Is it because of politics, or there are genuine reasons when it comes to the equalization of this fund and having equitable distribution of resources to devolved units?
Once again, just to say thank you for having me here. I'm here in the capacity first as a taxpayer, obviously, and secondly also as the team leader, really the executive director at National Taxpayers Association. So this conversation interests us in two ways, and what you have said is because revenue over the years has been politicized. So that is one thing, and we must delink that. Okay. Because the economy of a nation should not be subjected and held ransom because of political and partisan interest. At the end of the day, when we pay taxes as citizens, we do not pay it based on which political affiliations we come in. So then if it can be delinked and we look at it from that clear sense that it is a right, that we pay tax, so then we should get services. And particularly the more concern for me is that the more there is a delay, then it means people who have actually paid their tax are being denied basic services.
In this case, the cash crunch in the counties.
Exactly. So I would say that is one, but also apart from the political discussions around it, having looked at the CRA discussions and recommendations, there is a lot that went into this discussion. So even the economic impact of it, and indeed, both parties have genuine concerns, because as we say that resources must follow functions, and that was the critical objective of the CRA formulas, that they will attach resources based on functions. But additionally, we also must realize that over the years, there have been counties that have been left behind. We have, like, say, the equalization fund that tries to remedy this. So if we then have an equalization fund, but within our current within the current framework, then we are still trying to take them further. And we know that because of landmass and the size of a county, even the cost of providing services is a bit higher than with these other counties that would benefit. So I would say it's both an economic, and we cannot delink it from politics, but politics should not take the center stage in terms of this discussion.
Okay, we will get the sound bites from the Murang'a County Senator Irungu Kangata, who as well as the majority whip after the purge on the perceived allies of the Deputy President William Ruto in tying the resource allocation to the Building Bridges initiative. Dr. Juma, nonetheless, when I come to you on this, you look at the Senate and it appears that it is lengthening the crisis at the counties because services are halted and the Monanchi appears to be not getting the services from the county administration. How do they need to be cautious enough and take, and in this case, detach the sort of interested parties and the interest politically attached to 316 billion county money?
Well, this crisis is a self-inflicted crisis, and with a political interest that are not clear, or some could be geared towards a specific interest that I think counties ought not to have been subjected to. Because if you look at current request or the change of the formula that this, let me say, Jubilee government is pushing, it takes us way back in history. One celebrated constitutional reform that you had was in 2010, and a lot were covered for purposes of addressing more so the historical justices, which majority revisited. And this informed, if you look at Article Chapter 12 of our Constitution, Article 202 and 201,
yes.
The 201 gives the principles of public finance and how it ought to be done. And the 202 give equitable sharing of national revenue, where revenue raised nationally shall be shared equitably among the national and county government. County government may give additional allocation from national government share of revenue, either conditionally or unconditionally. But the key point is on number 3, equitable share and other financial laws, where there are areas which required affirmative action, considering the previous historical injustices.
Marginalization by the previous
government. Exactly,
governments.
the marginalization by previous government. And when right now certain persons are taking pride on population or number, they are forgetting so quick that certain areas, actually their numbers were massacred, their numbers suffered a blow because of marginalization. Their numbers actually were victims of the political leaders of then. And for purposes of nationalization, which actually was what was joining the hip of these other political leaders at the BBI, was establishing proper national ethos, proper national vision. And when you're talking about nationalism, which actually should be our governing economic policy, because at this day and age, what tribalism has done to us politically, Ayub, Kenyans suffered enormously through this political, tribal, tribal economic cards or political cards. And people who are revisiting it are people who should be viewed keenly, and we should, if possible, teach them the lessons before they mess us up, because the individuals who have suffered enormously on this marginalized economic allocation have not actually come to level with the purported individuals who now want to fall back on a formula that privilege their numbers, privilege their political interests, yet the others are still suffering. There have been no proper review on land allocation. You remember Ndungu land report. Remember the Waki report. And even if you're going revisiting curricular report. So this discussion, one, it is a blow to BBI, and I think the party is over, and these people should take it as clear as is communicated, that these people are not interested. And if this is the card they are going to use, maybe the other bit, the handshake partners, need to wash their hands and reorganize their political future. But it is not in good taste, even if it was being used as a political card to make a statement to your handshake partner.
Which again perhaps brings me to the point, Irene, on the solemn promise of the handshake. And let's shelve that for a moment and finish up on this resource issue before we come to the perspective on the principles here who are the fulcrum point, in this case the president, the deputy president, and the ODM party leader, Raila Odinga. But given what's happening at the moment, the Senate ought to be the guardrail, the safeguard of the devolved system of governance in the country, if any institution that is said to be mentioned. Why do you think they're lengthening, they're prolonging, and how will this longevity then affect perhaps the running of affairs across our counties that are even struggling to cope with the unintended consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Rightfully said that it would seem at face value like the Senate is prolonging the process, but we're really getting interesting and valuable insights within the different proposals that members of the Senate have proposed. Mm-hmm. It makes us look inside. So for me, rather than hurrying a process, we know that sharing of resources is a very emotive issue. Mm-hmm. It has potential of derailing our issue of tolerance and many other things. So I would go with the suggestions that I've had from Senate. Why not shelve it a bit so that the formula doesn't take effect within this financial year, but then gives room for more of a discussion. The only caution I would give is that between the duration that Commission on Revenue Allocation gave this formula first, mm-hmm. Senate seemed to have sat on it for a long period and not taken that opportunity to discuss, rather than now bringing us to. In fact, this discussion almost resembles the discussion on the division of revenue bill. Mm-hmm. So they wait until the last minute, while they know that they actually are the upper houses they take pride in, and then meaning that you should protect the interests of the counties. So for one, I would say that they have failed us, they have failed counties and the people that they represent in terms of waiting towards the tail end. That then denies citizen services. So that would be one. But in the sense of looking like they're lengthening the process, no. The discussion is a weighty one, and we would not imagine that it would be a discussion that can be done in a short time. So that is why we hope that we are taking lessons, that even the subsequent formulas, we should then allocate time, because the interests are varied, there is so much at stake, and obviously then that means a longer period of time.
Okay, which again brings me to the point, before I come to Dr. Nyuma, to the aspect about the nitty-gritty detail here, that is this formula not taking effect this financial year, which we are already in, started in July. But given that the Building Bridges initiative is set to hand over a report, that the proposal we had 35% of the devolved money going to the counties of the cash, which means then translates to 700 billion Kenya shillings county cash. Why then perhaps not adopt this ground that we need to end this stalemate, not of course affected this financial year, but even as we anticipate the handing over of the report of the BBI, then more money will be even channeled to the counties amounting to 700 billion Kenya shillings. Why is that cautious lacking from the political players in the Senate?
First, Ayub, I guess you'll have to rephrase the question a bit for me, but my first, even before you rephrase that question, is what I had earlier said, the linking of politics and the economy, because you cannot cast it and say that we will give 30%. There is no magic thing around the 30%, because you must expand the cake. So if you're not expanding, where are we assuming that the money will come from? Remember, any attempt to give either the county or national level more resources would ordinarily mean that you are taxing people more, because government has no money of its own. So the push to give more at either level then means the taxpayer is being burdened more. So unless then we say that government seals the loopholes around corruption, takes on less debt, and we know that government has not shown any goodwill in terms of sealing loopholes. So then that is what I would say, that we mustn't see that whatever discussion we're having has to have, this percentage has to go to the county. So for me, there is no pressure. I would say there is really no pressure. We must understand, however long it takes, if you look at the opposite of it, you rush it and you have potential of tension, you have potential of governments, 47 governments that are not speaking to each other, and that is not something that the country can deal with.
Okay, right, which is even further crisis the counties.
Just to add onto the same, yes, because well, the 35% devolvement of the national budget was a genuine call, because the intention of devolution was to bring the money to the people. And for sure, ever since devolution was effected, a lot, as can be seen, a lot of ripple effect on the ground. And we're pushing more money down, I mean, in the devolved system, benefits citizens more as compared to leaving a lot of money with the national government, where a lot of money has been lost through national interest and all these other arrangements, because corruption thrives a lot where money is kept without proper activities. When you've devolved health, you've devolved education, you've devolved you've devolved agriculture. All these major activities or the citizen interests or services that are devolved needs money. And as you could if you review the previous budget's allocation and also the expenditures of various counties, you realize that very minimum allocation goes to development. And this is what is where actually our progress is hit hard.
Okay.
Because the moment we can have substantial amount an allocation for purposes of development, then that economic empowerment is what can also push citizens to be active politically.
Okay.
Because without effective economic empowerment, you cannot have an effective, political growth or even political reform. Our main reform lies with the citizen. The moment we put more money or pump more money to the citizen, then yes, we give, we empower the citizen in a way that also we can overcome these carrots and the handovers that has been the main perennial disease,
okay,
which way out influence voters' interest. Instead of voting for issues, they keep on voting based on the pockets. And you never know who comes with the pockets. You've seen what the Kirinyaga people are going through, what the Kiambu people also went through, because pockets will always come. People will always loot. But if citizens are empowered to understand their interests, to understand issues, so that whatever drives them is an issue-based, then definitely our next politics will be much better compared to current situation.
Perhaps a paradigm shift that you're alluding to. Irene, then let's finish on this aspect about the cash resources here and of course, disputed 316 billion Kenya shillings. To many, the sessional paper number 10 of 1965 was a deceptive, attempt which created political and equal country, and today we're witnessing the improper inequality in Kenya. And of course, it means logically then that if Area A has hospitals developed courtesy of sessional paper number 10 of 1965, meaning it needs more resources, more personnel to help running of the infrastructure, then how do we perhaps look at Article 27 of the Constitution, which under subsection 6 talks about state taking about legislative and other measures, including affirmative action programs and policies designed to redress any disadvantage suffered by individuals or groups because of past discrimination by the state. Then perhaps have this sober discussion on the leveling, on the equalization of the playing field economically, socially, and politically for Kenya to prosper.
True, you cannot have development as a country when you're leaving a significant part of your population behind. And for me, this discussion is coming also at a timely time when we are looking at the COVID-19 situation. So with the COVID-19 situation, we have learned that you cannot be safe in your own space. So if, say, the marginalized areas do not have water and sanitation services, so that means even right now, if even Nairobi were to say, seem Nairobi, Kiambu, the counties that seem much better, they cannot even win the battle on COVID-19 without the interest of the other areas. So you have potential of a disease moving from the area that you have forever forgotten to come and even harm you and waste all the resources you have over the years accumulated within your area. So for me is then to see a country as one whole. And you cannot say that we will leave one side behind, because you might seem like you're progressing, but a pandemic like this hits you and you know that, oh, really, we are one country. So equalization, affirmative action funds is something that we must put in place. But for me, the discussion around both county allocation of revenue, I thought would be something that, because remember first, the Constitution does not envision that you would have equalization fund that runs in eternity. It's actually for a period until you bring people up. So if then that fund is for a period, but the most sustainable process being the county allocation of revenue, where even within the county allocation of revenue, then you still have a formula that is going to continue perpetuating that inequality that you're trying to address with other funds. It doesn't make sense. So as a country, we must stop being selfish. That is what I would say. The marginalized counties have taken around 50 years living with the scenario where they were left behind. So I think it is high time now that the other counties also take some few years until the other countries come at par. And Ayub, I think this division of revenue, not the county allocation of revenue discussion, brings even further issues around even rural-urban migration. While some counties are saying that there are more, Nairobi is, why are we having more people in Nairobi? So the issue is not even just an issue of resource. our planning has problems. If you had opened up the other counties, that I can safely have know that I have good hospitals for my family in Turkana, I can work and there is water, I have no need to be in Nairobi, where then the numbers would seem high and you want then to just give resources based on the numbers. So the issues are deeper than just resources. It's around planning. It's around how, as a country, we have decided to move. And so let us not over-scrutinize and think that the discussion around how we share this revenue will sort out fundamental things that we have refused to address over the years. Okay,
Dr. Juma, before I come to you, let me get this soundbite from the West Pokot County Senator, Samuel Pogijo, who as well serves as the leader of the majority party in the Senate, who spoke on this matter.
Order number 2, motion, approval of the third basis for revenue allocation among county governments.
Leader, what is your? The Speaker. The Speaker, I did ask for a meeting, for this meeting, as a special sitting for 10 a.m. this morning. Mr. Speaker, and as you can see, my request now, because even the mover is not here, but my request now, Mr. Speaker, is that we consider adjourning.
Order members. Order members. Order members. Order.
Mr. Speaker, I request as the leader of the majority on this side that the meeting be held now on another day, another time, so that we can make conclusions, Speaker. I move, Speaker.
Order. Yes. Order, senators. Order, senators. Order. There is only one speaker in this Senate. And the chair, order. And the leader of majority had requested that we have.
That is the unceremonious ending of the Senate on Thursday after disagreeing on the formula to which the 316 billion Kenya shillings that was ought to be channeled to the counties led to standoff at the floor of the House. However, on the same point, let's also take a look at this front page of the Daily Nation this Monday morning. Here's what the paper had highlighted. Big test for Uhuru, Raila and the Deputy President, William Ruto. We can have this pulled down in some seconds, and as you can see, it's different tests for the President and the Deputy President and the ODM party leader Raila Odinga on losing some political ground for each. For the Deputy President William Ruto, who according to the paper was isolated from the government he belongs to, appears to be having the numbers in terms of the senators he can marshal to support or either reject the proposal made at the floor of the Senate. For the ODM party leader Raila Odinga, the ODM contingent appears to be silent on the matter, while President Uhuru Kenyatta's allies from the mountainous region appear to be concerned about the money that is channeled to the counties, and the president is, of course, now striking the delicate balance on appeasing his political backyard and, of course, the handshake partner, the ODM party leader. Dr. Juma, before I come to you, let's also hear from the Murang'a County Senator, who equally serves as the majority whip at the Senate, Murang'a County Senator, that is Irungu Kangata, and here is what he had to say over the weekend.
So the idea that people are fearing, hey, some counties are going to lose, is hogwash. It's not true. It's false. Already in the BBI, we are devolving that 5% of the national revenue. So there is no single county that is going to lose. So no passage of formula, no BBI.
Dr. Juma, no BBI is the last sentence that underpins Senator Kangata's line here after giving his account on what happened at the floor of the Senate on Thursday. It is a clear illustration, isn't it, of perhaps the rotten state of Kenya's political status, formed on conditions, ultimatums, and perhaps not for the good will of the Kenyan Mwananchi's progress.
I mentioned earlier that treachery begot treachery, deceit begot deceit, justice beget justice. And whatever approach or how you handle your leadership process, I think you'll beget the same. But I also stated earlier that the philosophy behind the one-man, one-vote revenue allocation, I mean, 1 shilling revenue allocation, that formula is against the BBI philosophy. And it speaks it loud, even without questioning. And lo and behold, he has come out clear that the intention is BBI. And Uhuru, for once, exposes their relationship with Raila. And looks like Raila has enjoyed fellowshipping with Uhuru for a while without stating or making demands, which Deputy President was actually known for, making a lot of demands, especially for his 2022 succession. And Raila seems to have enjoyed the ride without setting demands. And just at the moment when he was beginning to state his demands, then you can see clearly Uhuru has refused to kick the ladder.
In this case, he never spoke, of course, personally, but this is a translation of the president's feeling.
Speaking loud and clear that he's not kicking the ladder, he can go back. and this makes it very clear that there may be no BBI as things, as Uhuru's quotas are concerned, and from Uhuru's perspective. And the question should be asking then, what next? Because yes, for Raila, as usual, he can come up with another options. Then we meet in the field in 2022. And Uhuru may then resort to working on how to finish his term, which yes, he has successfully gotten the formula, because he can still balance and juggle and finish his term if things work his way. Unless, because he refused to impeach his deputy. He has even when you saw the reward of
was it perhaps
committees.
then perhaps that refusal might be, is it attributable to the fact that the president might be seeking some soft landing spot in Ruto in the event the handshake falters away?
Exactly, because the reason why he has refused to kick the ladder, that specifically tells you that he does not have pure, 100% confidence in his handshake partner. And that again is going to set another stage for our political future. And this kind of dynamics are the things that citizens need to weigh. And I've mentioned this here before, whether they are pro-citizen development agenda or anti. Because sincerely speaking, the straw that Uhuru Camp is holding on to walk away from BBI is not really addressing the historical injustices that we've had, especially on marginalization and the necessary affirmative action that Irene has talked about. And if they were to revert us back to those days, to those old days where some people feel that they are better than others, to date, even in the political parties, it is very sad that the national allocation is benefiting just 2 political parties. And these 2 political parties assume that the rest of the other 68 political parties should suffer for the purposes of their own benefit. And what they forget, and these are the myopic, I call it tumbocratic nature of some leaders who don't think with their head and think just with their stomach and think about now. Because if we were to think of, about posterity, and look at political reforms and see how this country or this geographical location can be compared globally, whether we should remain equal or we will always remain. Look at the current vaccination discussion. We are going to be the test ground. Look at the economic indicators. We are still being categorized as
middle income.
Or middle income. If we were to make this geographical location second to none or equal in the face of humanity, there are certain measures that we must invest in. Like political parties, we must allow parties to be driven by issues. And issues or manifestos should be brought on the table. Not this tribe, not this number. Whereas these numbers that you're showing us, some of them just like you are surprised that even that only 5 counties are ready,
prepared, yeah.
even the census may be a hoax,
okay.
which is by design being used now for the purposes that we are seeing.
Okay.
So if we really have to have balanced national, because you are as strong as your weaker link, as long as Somali or coastal area is still not privileged, then we will still see Al-Shabaab hitting us. We will still see Mombasa, see Kenya. We will see all these things, and all these things have not been beneficial to economic growth. Okay. You've seen the terrorist attack, and these are the thriving grounds that actually create and nurture these terrorists. Okay. I mean, to grow within. We can close this down if we allocate revenue equally.
Economic equality, and perhaps agreed on the point of socio-economic here, because Al-Shabaab for the past long, according to reports by intelligence agencies across the globe, has been targeting the less vulnerable in the society who have no economic means, therefore recruiting them, and in the cases of Mombasa and the 5 frontline counties in the northeastern part of the country. Irene, if I may come to you then, when you hear what Senator Kangata did say, there are many who had been skeptical about the coming together of Kenyatta and Odinga. In this case, never knew about what the handshake was about, shrouded in secrecy. And does it perhaps blossom what appears to be again the coming together of anti-handshake team, and in other capacity, is it likely to open up a new political battlefront and then perhaps lengthen the already disservicing political players and establishment ever since 1992?
I think this situation has really brought to the fore the reasons and the motivations behind the 2 parties coming together. Of course, it was something that none of us had anticipated would happen, but from this discussion, we see it's very partisan issues that was fueling this coming together of these 2 entities. But for me, I like the fact that this has then, and should open what Juma has pointed out, should open the citizens to know that we simply seem to be on our own. So when will the citizens be able to push back against partisan political coalitions that do not add value? Remember now the BBI, apart from what some of the politicians had in it for themselves, there is quite a bit that if addressed can move the country forward. But if this is going to be, the deathbed of some of these provisions would be simply because of the conversation about the county allocation of revenue, I think that is very reckless of our political leaders to kind of want to throw everything away. Remember the cost of even that, just that discussion, and the varied input that citizens from all walks of life, both professionals, remember the BBI, I do recall the people that made submissions. It was not politicians, and so politicians alone should not look at this that we are not...
As if it's their own property or belonging.
It isn't their own property. There are very many credible institutions from civil society organizations, media, professional institutes, and bodies such as ISPAC itself made contributions and proposals towards that document. So for me, for a politician to assume with all the money that went into this document and all the intellectual, rigorous contributions of Kenyans, that simply because you're not getting what you want, you would want to throw off a document like that, that should really be treated with the contempt is deserved, and we must tell them that this is not something that we are going to look on kindly as citizens. So yeah, as you've said, it just brings to the fore what citizens have refused to understand for the longest time, that it is not about it is always about them, as he's called it. Juma has put it very well. Is it tumbo politics or something around that? Yes, but now is also the time for citizens to push back. Allow me, Ayub, just to... I've been trying to follow the conversation a bit, where then you find that now what both proponents and opponents of the formula are pointing out and saying that we are doing this because of the citizens that we represent. But Ayub, if you look at the Control of Budgets report, for the last quarter, we are in the 3 quarters, the report that was shared recently. The Control of Budgets has pointed out that there is still a lot of wastage. So the budget, at the point of passing the budget, the citizens are given are elevated, and they say we need this formula because we must provide services to the taxpayers. But when you start querying, after you give them the budget, when you start querying that budget, it no longer reflects citizens. It then reflects partisan options. So for this discussion, I'm sure even most Kenyans sometimes treat it even with the contempt, because they know whether you take formula A or B, it will never make a difference in my life. I'd rather try to get a living for my family and leave this politics aside. So let us just have citizens being, the political class being very sincere with what they do.
Okay, which in this case perhaps includes the partisan nature of the conduct of the establishment you've mentioned. It's all about now the senators who are championing the, of course, the counties on the losing end. For them, it's all about some who read. For them, it's all about, seeking the governorship in 2022. Yes. And therefore, they can't face the people who are cash-strapped and are championing in that particular cause, when in the real sense, the same county administration has been misusing funds under the Auditor General's report as highlighted. Therefore, then perhaps is it time for the Kenyan monarchy, the voters, to coalesce around a cause? And how can we do a paradigm shift in changing the nature of our leadership and come up with a crop of new leaders who will instill fresh blood in the country's political establishment?
For me, Ayub, a very progressive provision in the Constitution was the independent candidates. I think that is something that we, as the voters, need to take and make use of. Because then if you go after a grouping that is either the main players, ODM or Jubilee, these are people who have really funded that cause in their campaigns to the extent that immediately after they come in, then they must recoup the investment. It's almost a business. I must recoup my investment. But if we get a credible individual whose sole motivation for going to the ballot is to make a difference in the life of Kenyans, those are the people that we again have gone back to our tribal cocoons, gone down to our own partisan things, and do not give them the light of day. However, the second conversation for me, Ayub, would be around the finance bills and the passage of the Finance Act. This for me is a time again that citizens need to push back. Citizens who have then mobilized very well. So if you are in a certain industry, is it the public sector industry, look at the fact that the finance bill has now brought to us what they call the public the tolling. So for you to use a road over and above the fact that you've paid tax, then you'll additionally have to pay an investor who, if we look at the funding mechanism, look at the medical equipment schemes, that the senators themselves who should oversight and look at the interests of counties, saying they have never looked at the contract for that deal. So then if the county, or rather national and county government once again to come with finance bill that raid your pockets, what are we doing as citizens? But Ayub, lastly, and allow me, which will be a bit of leaving off your question, is I have not understood why there is so much noise by senators around what they see that some counties are losing. But when you look at other critical areas like the medical equipment scheme, that is where counties are almost losing something similar to what they would gain within this. So that is why I'm saying there is too much attention on this, while within the cycle of the budget, there are other opportunities that counties are losing off significantly. So that we also expect to see the senators coming out strongly and not just at one point within the budget cycle that we see them moving. And lastly, also just to mention that if you recall, the only time I have seen governors really fighting with the citizens was when the time the governors marched, and I think it was still around the division of revenue last year. But we do not see that type of leadership from the chair of the Council of Governors at other critical times of accountability. So ours is to say that the senator and even the Council of Governors must demonstrate the same passion when it comes to matters of accountability, equal to the passion they display when it comes to the division of that revenue. Okay, which again brings me to the point about, you've mentioned the aspect about the effective utilization and the medical equipment that, according to the former Attorney General, Githu Muigai, did say that they did it under pressure and some of the procedures adopted were never, of course, legal. And the former Health CS did say that we were under duress. Dr. Juma, in one final response here before we turn our attention to the expected address to the nation by President Uhuru Kenyatta on the looming lockdown, what many say is definitely going to be on the paper that the president will read from this afternoon. And you look at the environment around the Senate at the moment, and we can't, of course, take away politics from the equation.
and the proposal on the revenue, of course, which will not take effect in this financial year. Therefore, having this wiggle room in terms of specifying, in terms of negotiating and adopting a diplomatic ground, going forward, then perhaps how do we address this issue once and for all, instead of this perpetual continuity of crisis at the counties because of the Senate deadlocked over a matter that's supposed to be, of course, going to be resolved, or that ought to be resolved by the same House?
They just need to implement the Constitution, Article Chapter 12, Article 201, 202, and 203, and will not be having that standoff. And the challenge with the myopic leadership, that one lies with the citizen. And of course, as she mentioned, yes, independent candidates may not even be a solution alone. If you look at our electoral system, the way it is structured, it favors political parties. And there are a number of political parties. We have over 70 political parties now. And you need, like Justice and Freedom Party that I lead. We are pushing for a new dawn that is not centered around the tribal kings, the way we've seen perennially our leaders choosing around this tribe, this tribe is led by who, and this other tribe is led by who. We've been driving issue-based agendas which are resonating with economic reform, whether on education. We've championed alternative education curriculum that can educate us to extremely departure from the current norms of consumerism, by being individuals who can manufacture and create. When we were proposing holistic health, little did we know that we'll be hit hard by this global pandemic. And this pandemic has exposed the things that ought to even have united this country together. The president wants counties to be ready. How can county be ready if they are not supported? Because all the counties were allocating their resources based on their priorities, which have actually changed. So if we were to harmonize this situation, because I've mentioned here before that COVID-19 is not something that you can leave to a county alone. It needs a national input, not only national input, even continentally. AAU has come together with various continents, and the Global World Health Organization has come together to put this thing together, unless they're just playing politics. If truly they want measures that can transform the, people's health, this was an opportunity which we can use to make history, but also we can waste it the way they're wasting it away with the blame game. You can use it to address health, even health tourism. Kenya can be a place where Burundi will come and seek medical attention.
Yet we have Kenyans flocking
Uganda
out of the
can,
country.
exactly.
Okay.
Tanzania can come and seek medical attention here. But they are wasting this opportunity. You still hear them being airlifted to where? Dubai, and some are going to India, when we have an opportunity for us to address this issue. And instead of using it to benefit the citizen, we are using it for our selfish interests. Even the aid that has been given, some people, yes, use it as charity aid. The aid that is given, some are wasting it, some are stealing it. It can't go to the intended person. And as we are focusing on all this, even before we audit and evaluate them, they're already focusing us on the other areas, very emotive areas, which can lead to bloodshed. The issue of marginalization is not something we want to revisit right now. This is something we overcame. This is something we defeated. And somebody who is taking us in this, back to this dark age, these are the individuals whom we should treat harshly.
And of course, since the promulgation of the 2010 Constitution, the new devolved system of governance brought about what appears to be, of course, an economic sense across the devolved units in the 47 counties. Irene and Dr. Juma, let's now turn our attention to what the country is expected to hear from the president, and this is in regard to the head of state who is set to address the nation. And governors want Nairobi, Mombasa back on lockdown after cases of the pandemic upsurged since the president last addressed the nation on the 6th of July 2020. A report, of course, presented according to the paper to the president apparently did not capture the real reflection of the ground and the county preparedness when it comes to containing the spread of the pandemic across the 47 counties, with Kenya recording the highest number of the infection since March 2020. Yesterday, 960 cases of the pandemic were confirmed here in the country. Irene, once more, the head of state will be taken to the lectern, perhaps to talk to Kenyans about a review of the guidelines in place meant to contain the pandemic. But given what's, of course, happened ever since he last addressed the nation, an upsurge in the number of cases that crept up to double digits, you have the lower stringency percentage measures vis-a-vis the proportion of deaths and the rate of infection. When you look at all these factors, do you think then that perhaps the president might reconsider some of the measures that he lifted on the 6th of July 2020 and perhaps see Nairobi and Mombasa again back on lockdown?
Sadly, Ayub, that as a nation we are where we are. The numbers are shot up. And we have seen loved ones, we have lost loved ones, so it is really hitting home as it is right now. But the president and the entire nation is walking a tightrope. So do you close down the counties? And if you close down the counties, knowing full well that 78% of the population in both Nairobi and Mombasa and Kenya generally are in the informal sector. So these are not people that have a monthly pay that will come into their household budgets, so to speak. So then it is very difficult. I would ordinarily, and I think most doctors, I'm not a medical profession, but having heard what most have said, is the best thing would be to lock down these two counties. But looking at the reality of how our income structure is, it might be a problem in itself. Or rather, even if you lock it down, you might lock it down on paper, but in practice, people are still moving because you cannot police a person who's hungry. I cannot stay in my house when I have no food to give my children. So I am, in today's statement, I think I would expect the president moving forward to lock down these two counties, but provide safety nets for the people within this county. Otherwise, it is not going to be practical.
Which includes the stipends to the less vulnerable elderly.
But my question is the stipend that has been given to who? Very few people have benefited from it, but more people who are not even within the bracket, did not even assume they would be in a bracket that would require that kind of help, are now already in that bracket because people have lost their jobs. So it is much difficult, and again, we are seeing our government says, and I will say quote, that they do not have the resources, but we know we have been paying some of these resources. So indeed, it's a very difficult time for us. So if he locks down, what I would say is that we expect then government to be able to cushion not just vulnerable people, because I have noticed that the database that the government has used is either people who previously used to ask for bursaries, so the database that was previous, people who used to rely on support. But remember, a significant people who are never required that support have now moved to that bracket. Will government be able to then take care of this bigger pool of people?
It all again, perhaps before I come to Dr. Juma, translates, isn't it, to the economic management of the country, that you can stand for your people in terms of need. I mean, we have heard what Donald Trump has done in the U.S., where he injected about $1 trillion to the U.S. economy, but that's too little in a more than 20 trillion economy in the U.S. But for the U.K., which is a social welfare state that out of the crisis after World War II, and many European countries did emerge as social welfare states, perhaps has stood up with its people in terms of £2,500, which is about 300,000 Kenya shillings for its people. Isn't it then perhaps one that will perhaps make Kenya relook inward and have the intra-conversation in terms of our economic management, ending the begging bowl culture, effective maximization of the money borrowed, and perhaps putting our budget records straight at the end of the day when the dust settles on COVID-19?
So important lessons that we must take, but very skeptical whether government will take, because there have been very many opportunities and worse situations that have happened to Kenya, but government has not taken this lesson. So indeed, as you have mentioned, we must address first the issue of debt is a big one on the table. So we have taken on too much debt that then the government doesn't have fiscal space to be able to give us some of these things that as a right we as citizens of this country need. So that is one thing. Second also is in terms of how we manage our budget. So you would find that the recurrent expenditure is way higher than the development. If you had put enough money on development over the years, you would not need to do what we are now seeing, say the NMS in Nairobi, taking water to some areas. That would have been something that with or without COVID-19, you ordinarily provide to your citizens. But for me, most importantly, is how do we as a country, because knowing that because of climate change and more shocks, we expect, unfortunately, some of these things to happen within the existence of Kenya. So how does government use creative funding mechanisms? And I have seen a bill in Parliament, the Sovereign Wealth Bill, which then says from our existing resources, like we thought we had petroleum and now many things have happened and we are being told it's not a viable thing, but we have the other extractives. So from this, how do you then provide a safeguard? Is it Denmark, I'll be corrected, have a very solid sovereign wealth fund, so that even when a pandemic happens, when you do not have within the budget cycle room to look for things to cushion them, then you remove money from such a fund and give your people a certain amount to cushion them. So for me, to say, let us fast track. It's good that this conversation already started in Parliament, but let us fast track it, being informed by this crisis. Then we can be able to give government that needed flexibility, and that would even make us more patriotic Kenyans, if that is something we can ever be.
Okay.
Yes.
In mentioning Denmark, of course, the Scandinavian countries or the Nordic countries, rich enough, and we have one of the European Union countries that have no money to pay back to the headquarters in Brussels because of their economic muscle. Dr. Juma, it's all about the race to normalcy. But how normal is this race? I mean, and how do we normalize all this because of the local flare-ups and the creeping cases of the pandemic ever since the 6th of July when the head of state addressed the nation last? Well,
the essentials of health, which we needed to have adopted, which are very basic, happen to have been inverted by our national government in terms of their approach. Because the number that is shooting right now is a number that we would have realized earlier if we did effective testing. It's just showing that the testing is being done now, but the testing is done at a point when, because during the lockdown, lockdown should have been accompanied by social mitigations, which could have contained the people from any further exposure or spreading. And that's what we realized earlier, that without proper economic social mitigation, people were still out on the run. And actually that was just a heyday for police officers to get free money from citizens, which actually has not worked for us to flatten the curve. I've mentioned here before that the person who can flatten the curve is the citizen, not the president. If you work from bottom-up approach, then you can have a lot of effective impact. But if you invert the pyramid and focus on what is at the apex, what we should be finishing with, instead of where we should begin, then you actually enhance or fuel this crisis. And that is why some of us question the interest of the government. Right from the beginning, this thing was not brought on the citizen.
Okay.
I mean, this thing was brought on the citizen. It was not brought by the citizen. And you should not punish the citizen for your negligent. The moment this thing was whistleblown by a patriotic employee, the response was negative. Actually, he was taken where? And he ended up losing his job. And further to that, instead of closing the borders, they left our borders porous. Remember the Chinese plane that landed with 239 passengers, and who have not been tracked to date. So, looking at government's action, some by design has left us questioning whether did they want this thing to spread or do they want to contain it? Because currently, if we still need to contain or even lock down, we should lock down after considering proper socio-economic mitigation.
Okay.
And with proper socio-economic mitigation, then yes, less empower, even the doctors are dying because they're not equipped well. So if truly this thing was to be defeated, economically, you closed our hotels, you closed our businesses, and then when we need to reopen them, you charge us again a fee of reopening their own hotel, which you closed due to your own regulation.
Okay, which again the government is considering shutting them.
Exactly. One wonders, why are we punishing the citizen for what is not the citizen's fault? So the government needed specific economic measures, like those taxes. Zero rate, even when fuel was down, the government refused to lower the fuel. We asked for tax holidays. We asked for even zero rating land rates.
Okay.
But this is the moment when KRA has intensified, and this thing is even getting worse. So I think, it is upon the government to take and adopt measures that are working for our people, not that work against our people.
Okay. Irene, then, realistically, when you look at the mathematics ever since 6th of July, when the head of state last addressed the nation, there has been a numerical rise in the number of the pandemic, which again brings to fore perhaps the fears that we are in the peak season, the exponential growth in the number of the COVID-19 cases in the country. Then perhaps what do you think that the president might be considering here in terms of balancing between a population that is largely looking into an economic uncertain times, or again looking up, as we have seen earlier, as it happened with Nairobi, Mombasa and Mandera counties, and what is the gross consequence in the event the president shuts down the counties of Mombasa and Nairobi?
As I had earlier alluded to, a very difficult situation, because even as you think of shutting down both of these counties, remember, since we are just off a discussion around revenue, they are the counties that provide significant revenue. So that already means that government is looking at taxes that would go down. KRA has already pointed out to this, that taxes in the last quarter already less than the number they was expecting. So this will obviously move down when I'm looking at these two counties as contributors of revenue. But secondly also is looking at economic activities within this area. Remember that Kenya Association of Manufacturers, KEPSA and the likes have pointed to how most of their people would not be able to recover. So even we are looking at the issues around post-COVID, will we still have businesses that will either even be able to contribute to the economy? So government must balance, and Ayub, for this I'm looking at, I do not envy the president at this time together with his leadership. Just as the Daily was pointing it out, whether he takes option A, there are people who will not support it. Looking at option B, there are people who will not support it. But I hope that as a nation within this time, we'll also, just as we have asked our political leaders not to be partisan and look at the bigger picture. Remember players in the alcohol and beverage sector pushing back and saying that you cannot be able to limit us. So both sectors, I think, have to, every sector in the economy then has to look inward and see how can we, even as we ordinarily undertake the business that we do, how can we do it ethically to bring the numbers down? Remember, even the hotels were being told now they're selling alcohol. So this is not a government thing only. We as economic players, we as citizens must support. And Ayub, it might be a bit different, but I think we have reduced the issue of public awareness around how to manage the pandemic. Look at how people generally wear their masks. Half of them are off the nose. So it's all a concerted effort to address this. And my prayer and hope is that Kenya will come out stronger with lessons taken on board to reduce the impact of future pandemics. Okay,
of course, future pandemics are inevitable, as was the case with the Spanish influenza of 1918 in the world. Dr. Juma and Irene, let's hit the break here on the broadcast. When we come back in the last 10 minutes of the program, we'll be finishing up on this topic. And as we, of course, cherish your contributions, the number is 0791 478 990, the hashtag on Twitter, NewDayKE, the short SMS code is 40920. We are back after the break here on the broadcast. Good afternoon, welcome back. You are watching the broadcast, and thank you for staying with us here on New Day Kenya. The number is 0791 478 990, the hashtag on Twitter, NewDayKE, the short SMS code is 40920. Dr. Juma, then to you on this as we finish up on the broadcast here. Some of the containment measures put in place have seen perhaps low adherence to the guidelines by the government, thereby, of course, informing the increased cases of COVID-19 pandemic. And then you have the government saying this is the peak season and many Kenyans are worried. And the biggest worry above that is the capacity of our healthcare infrastructure to contain the pandemic. Where does the hope lie here? The asymptomatic nature of the cases of COVID-19 confirmed, or perhaps then us learning lessons of putting our healthcare systems into proper path so that they can handle future pandemics which are inevitable and might have such capacity in any case, given as we are witnessing what's happening with Germany, Italy, and in the United States of America?
Well, I give it to Kenyan citizens. So far, in comparison to other nationalities, citizens have really tried with such great resilience and with adverse environment and difficult economic moments and little socio-economic mitigation, especially from the government, you can see of the numbers that we're talking about. If you compare us with South Africa or Ghana, Kenyan citizens have tried. And to me, yes, there is hope. We have no choice but to defeat this thing. This thing cannot defeat us. Kenyan resilience actually has been tested. If we were to be killed, a number of things would have killed us. The nature of our leadership, if we withstood it to date, Ayub, we are the best citizen in the world who can stand irrespective of what circumstances we have. But we need a bit of some conscious input by the government. One challenge that is now hitting the citizens so hard, because the government ought to have looked at this thing within the pandemic moment and also after. And then we reached out with the government. I am one of the founder of I Stand With Kenya initiative, where we've also been calling on the government to have a joint combined initiative with the public sector and private sector, and even the citizen generally, and even the religious institutions, which to some extent they've tried. But certain measures, you know, when the government chooses to nationalize philanthropy, where you and I cannot take food to another person directly, those were the areas where the government missed in this game. You needed to engage and put our best soldiers forward. A number of committees which ought to have been looking at this thing in future were committees which could have been populated by best minds. In war, you put your best soldiers ahead, isn't it? But
on the front line.
Exactly, but not start rewarding interesting politicians, interesting corporators who contribute 300 million and back go and fire a number of employees who are being fired at a point of crisis with no rent, and then the president refused even to address the rent crisis. This is why people are moving en masses. And low to the landlords who refuse to heed our call.
Okay.
Because now you are losing on your rents, isn't it? These people are still living. If you had a working formula and allowed them to, pay even something or give them rent relief until we are all over it, those were the measures that needed to be in place. And then we needed policies to protect jobs.
Okay.
I know even your colleagues here are affected. People whose future right now are in question because they are being fired right, left, and centered without consideration. If measures were put in place to protect jobs, unfortunately, even the president's own company are leading in firing.
Okay.
So if the input of the citizen was to be questioned, I will give the citizen 100% in terms of their input and their support in this fight. If it was not the citizen, this thing would have escalated even worse than where it is. We need proper measures, and these are the things that the government must consider.
Okay.
We still need some focus on socio-economic mitigation. We need certain measures on job protections. We need proper provision and equipment of medical personnel who are helping us with this fight, without which, even if we enhance a test, if you're testing and you're not able to trace even the primary contacts who came into contact with these individuals, still this test may not be of good help.
All right.
And cannot help us cure this thing. But if you could test and also fast track and trace,
okay,
then yes, this combined effort with the citizen resilience, I assure you, Ayub, this can give us a better result than any other country or any other nation. Approach to this pandemic or fight to this pandemic.
Well, perhaps that might be informed by the government's inability and the appreciation by the same government that it cannot conduct mass testing, and Kenyans are providing wrong information when it comes to their primary contacts. But Irene, the president said that international flights are set to resume on the 1st of August, about 4 days' time. That is in under 96 hours. And then you have him addressing the nation today. And some of the expected outcome, which might be unlikely, is the locking up of Nairobi County. Then in terms of these flights that will be touching down at the JKIA, at the Moi International Airport, and at Eldoret International Airport, can it pose the likelihood of further upsurging and creating avalanche of extra COVID-19 cases, which is likely going to overstretch the government's capacity to respond to the virus?
Definitely, you've put it very rightfully that if we continue in the next under 96 hours, as you've mentioned, then there is that possibility. But I've already mentioned that the challenge is the economy at large. We need to give kind of to tourism of sorts, to getting our goods out, because this is the mainstay of our economy. So there is that pressure, but we must balance it. I think with the human life must be balanced with the economy, which one should take precedence. So for me, I would obviously say it is the life of your people. But again, someone will argue differently that if you do not have a livelihood, if you do not have a way to feed yourself, then you obviously do not have, you're not alive, so to speak. So for me, my call would be that if we go the way that the intention was to open, then we must make as much stringent precaution to ensure that we do not escalate this further. But if we could wait, my advice and my caution is that let us wait a bit, because we have seen a resurgence of the same thing in other countries that thought they were already out of the woods. This thing is coming back up. But allow me also just to revert to the question you were having with Mr. Juma in terms of what has made our numbers a bit go down and how can we mitigate that. I think as a country and even the presidency, we must start taking professional advice seriously. The medical union has, for the last 3 or 4 years, I have watched a lot of the industrial strikes. It has not so much been about their pay. It has been about the working conditions.
And the welfare.
And the welfare. So we have always said it is because they want more resources. They have always been at loggerheads, seem to be at loggerheads with counties, but you can see it was around such issues that have now come to haunt us. So I think even the way we treat unions, as government, we must start having sober discussions, and without even looking at the salary issues, look at the other underlying issues. So let us, as a country, take professional advice seriously. And secondly, also another concern for me would be the cost of treating and the cost of even the screening of this issue. Why is NHIF not taking this cost? So remember, government say that even private insurance, if I hold a private card, then this will be treated in a private facility. Today's newspaper, which we need to verify the veracity of that assertion, is that even the private insurers have said you can only be treated with your card in a public institution.
Okay.
So how many
which will
public
create a
institutions
public
do we
confusion.
have? Yes, and how many public do we have? And that still takes us back to the conversation we had previously of revenue. So say you continue giving more resources to these other counties. So what do our sisters in Turkana, Marsabit, if you say they can only use public hospitals, how many public hospitals are optimally staffed in those areas?
And of course, majority of the testing centers are public institutions.
Yes, so it's a bit tricky, and I think we must look at and even revisit the role of NHIF to the citizens of Kenya who are paying the NHIF fees but not getting services out of it. Too many exclusions, so we must balance. So for me, even moving forward, as we are looking at the peak, so to speak, how do we ensure that citizens can access services at no additional cost to them?
Which again perhaps is an element in the President's Big Four agenda. I mean, the universal healthcare coverage, accessibility, affordability. Dr. again, we are in the crucial phase here in the fight against the pandemic, and the government is lying or pinning its hopes on a public that largely didn't ignore the guidelines the government has put in place. And there seems to be a mistrust between the public and the government here because of the government's handling, for instance, in the case of Ali Gire, who shot the landing of the Chinese plane, which had 239 passengers on board. He was later charged with terror-related charges, of course, in court, but later he was reinstated by court to his place of work. And then you have that mistrust created ever since March, and then the first case is confirmed up to where we are today, more than 17,000 cases. How does perhaps the government gain the ground of confidence here, even as it pins its hope on the public to contain the pandemic now, because it seems that it's out of hand?
Well, mistrust, they ever trusted the government in the first place? There will be mistrust if there was trust. But I know what Kenyans have longed for is a government that they can trust, the government who have the interests at heart, which apparently has been a challenge because of the measures that are taken. But yes, this is an issue of life and death. We are fighting for bio-life, not only bio-life, but also a way of life. We are a religious society, and the way we worship, the way we do our things have been affected. Our culture, this thing has touched our life, have turned our life upside down. And whether the government liked it or not, we are fighting this thing. All we needed to do is fight it together. But whether we trust the government, you've seen, even the other day we had KEPS attenders, and how the government has handled this thing all through. Even the moment the government posted to Kenya the first COVID recovery patient.
Of course, Kenyan questions.
You saw, exactly, you saw KOT. And then even to date, yes, individuals who, who have come out publicly, the lashes that they've received online tells you the status where Kenyans are. And this is because, by and large, the government has lacked to inform and communicate to Kenyans.
Includes public awareness.
Exactly, regarding this issue entirely. The focus, when they are talking, they are only actually measuring in areas of fear and then, areas that are, you know, if you don't treat it normally, it will treat you abnormally.
You can get it.
Yes. Some people now are saying, I've got it, you know, and it's going on. And that's not an inclusive approach on how to bring the citizen on board, because they ought to have looked at measures on how to overcome this thing. The individuals who are doing home care, where this virus can be, you know, you can self-medicate, isolate yourself at home, and still work around it. And we've seen people recovering. And when they were discussing those things, they needed to have brought and involved the citizen within this war. And the citizens are trying their best, and I know the government now is seeing the need of that. And the key moment are economic mitigative measures, areas that touch their life the most.
Okay.
Because no one will sit at home. We saw our lady who said, you know, I'd rather go and die than watching my children do what? Remember, some boiling stones for their children to eat because there's no job. And some people are walking home. Actually, some people are locked inside a house because they can't even go out to look for a job by landlords. We've seen people whose roofs are being removed. So when you're talking about trust by citizen to the government, this proper resolution of these things and helping them fight this thing with dignity, those are the things that could have helped them earn the government trust. But the more the government continue to act in this manner, then all that they're doing is eroding even the little trust that they ought to have gotten.
Okay, let me give the last words to Irene as we wrap things up here on the broadcast. Yes, go ahead, Irene.
Okay, for me, government must, what I have previously said, is that government must demonstrate value to its citizens in terms of the taxes they pay, and that value then comes to be shown in services. And I'd just like also to add what Juma has mentioned, we must fight with dignity. So let this pandemic not expose us to indignity as citizens of Kenya, and we must fight together.
Okay, we end it on that. What a time. But because we need to be wrapping up things here on the broadcast, I appreciate your time, Dr. Justus Juma, the leader of the Justice and Freedom Party, JFP. Dr. Your time is appreciated. Irene Otieno, the coordinator of the National Taxpayers Association, thank you so much for coming. And thank you to you too for watching. We'll be here tomorrow morning at the same time. Bye-bye.